Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to process your sources, extract the vital knowledge, and, well, give you the ultimate shortcut to being truly well-informed.
And today we're tackling a period that's just so profoundly misunderstood. It's wrapped in these really misleading labels.
Labels. You almost need to start this deep dive with a kind of historical intervention, don't we?
We really do. Our mission basically is to define and then, frankly, aggressively dismantle this whole concept known as the Dark Age.
We've sourced material covering, well, everything from secret Christian codes found in Pompeii all the way to these spectacular Islamic star charts you find in desert bathhouses. It's quite a range.
It really is.
That name, though, Dark Age, it just immediately brings up images of, complete ruin, ignorance, cultural shadow.
Exactly. And historically, we're talking about a huge span of time, roughly 7th century.
Yeah, starting around the 4th century AD, when the Western Roman Empire really started its long collapse.
And running all the way up to the 11th century, officially ending, you could say, around 1066, when William the Conqueror invaded England.
So to just slap the label dark on that enormous period, it feels almost like historical laziness, doesn't it?
It really does. The art, the architecture, the technological leaps happening in this era, they tell a completely different story.
It wasn't an age of shadow at all.
No, not at all. It was an age of intense intellectual borrowing, actually. Immense artistic light, you could argue, and radical cultural shifts, often driven by sheer necessity.
Okay, let's unpack that then. We've sort of identified three main creative forces that really stepped up into that void left by Rome, defining the era. First, there's the movement that, well, it needed total secrecy just to survive initially, but ultimately it conquered the West. The early Christian, thoroughly underestimated.
Definitely. And second, you have the groups who are just so aggressively demonized by Roman and later Christian writers.
The so-called barbarian tribes.
Yeah. Exact. The Huns, the Goths, the Vandals, their art, their political structures, they were far more sophisticated than they ever got credit.
We'll definitely need to dig into that. And finally,
there's this explosion of ingenuity that happened, particularly in the religion of Islam. Joyous, inventive, sophisticated. It provided so much of the era's, cutting-edge science.
That's quite a mix. Where do we start? You mentioned secrecy?
Yeah.
Maybe with the early Christians?
We should begin by looking at those secret identity markers, the codes they had to adopt just to survive in the early days. You see, the initial aesthetic of Christianity, it wasn't really born out of choice. It was fundamentally an art of survival.
Because they were persecuted.
Constantly. So the faith developed this inherent, almost magical appetite for signs and symbols. It really predicted the direction art would take for, the next 700 years.
And there's one example that's just perfect for this in there, a really mysterious one. It comes from this startling archaeological find.
You mean the Rotas Square?
Exactly. It's proof that Christians were operating deep inside the Roman Empire incredibly early, like 79 AD early, because they found evidence preserved in the volcanic ash of Pompeii.
That's right. The Rotas Square, a deeply mysterious inscription. And these squares weren't just in Italy.
No. They've turned up all over the Roman world, haven't they? Syria, Gaul.
Even as far north as Cirencester in England, typically just scratched onto walls, columns, doors of houses, almost like graffiti, but, sacred.
So what is it exactly? It looks like a simple word game, right?
It does. It's a palindrome. 5 Latin words: satyr, arepo, tenet, opera.
You can read it horizontally, vertically, forwards, backward, always the same.
Yeah, but the literal meaning is just vague, chromatically confusing. Something like the sower arepo holds the wheels with effort. It doesn't make a lot of sense on its own.
Codebreakers puzzled over that for decades, trying to make the literal words mean something profound.
And the big revelation, the real eureka moment, came when they realized the importance wasn't the words themselves, which are, frankly, a grammatical mess, but the individual letters.
Okay, so you rearrange the layout.
Exactly. You take all the letters from the square, rearrange them, and you can form a cross that reads Pater Noster, Our Father, the opening of the Lord's Prayer, both vertically and horizontally.
Wow. Okay, that's clever, but there must be letters left over.
There are. And here's where it gets really interesting. It shows the theological precision. Guess which 2 letters are left?
I don't know.
Only 2, Alpha and Omega.
The first and last letters of the Greek alphabet.
In the Roman form, yes. Which was already a popular Christian code for God, the beginning and the end.
The sheer ingenuity of that, it suggests some really profound intellectual effort right at the start.
Absolutely. The whole structure, when you decode it, points only to God and his Son. It's incredible.
So these weren't just random squares. They function as, secret sign.
Essentially, yeah. Secret signs outside houses signifying the occupants were Christian. Well, more than just a sign, probably seen as a protective term, too. A talisman against evil.
And that established this whole artistic direction, didn't it? Rooted in mystery, suggestion, intellectual code.
Precisely. And that art of mystery is best preserved underground.
In the Roman catacombs, people still have that image of Christians hiding down there.
Yeah, but you couldn't really hide underground cemeteries this massive from the Roman authorities. They definitely knew they were there.
So they weren't hiding places, just burial places.
Primarily burial places, yes. But what the Romans likely didn't know was the secret language the Christians were using down there in the art.
Hidden meanings in plain sight.
Exactly. Early Christian art was just filled with these symbols. Take the fish, the ichthys.
That became ubiquitous, didn't it?
It did. Not just because of the connection to the Eucharist, but because it was this incredibly clever visual acrostic in Greek. Jesus Christos, Theoios, Soter, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior.
And I love that story, probably apocryphal, but still, about Christians meeting on the road.
Oh, where one draws a half arch in the dust.
And the other completes the fish shape, instantly confirming their shared faith. It's such a perfect example of, efficient, portable identity.
It really is. And then there was the chi rho, the Christogram.
Combining the Greek letters chi and rho.
That's it. The first two letters of Christos, the anointed one. We still use it today, technically, with Xmas.
Right. And the anchor.
The anchor was appealing mostly because it looked like a cross at the top. It was a symbol of hope, of finding safe harbor, which resonated. But again, it's symbolic and engaging the imagination different, a direct image.
It is striking how few actual pictures of people there were in those first few centuries. No Jesus, no Mary, no saints, really.
Not in the way we think of them now. It isn't until around 300 years after Christ's death, right at the beginning of our so-called dark, that figures and scenes finally start.
And even then, they're incredibly coded.
Very coded. You find this language of salvation, particularly in the burial, the catacombs of Priscilla from the 3rd century.
And if you look at those paintings, you don't see the suffering Christ we're so used to see with peacocks.
Peacocks, yeah. And 3 young men standing totally unharmed in a fire, and a man being coughed up by a huge fish or sea monster.
Okay, so decode those for us. The peacock.
They symbolized eternity. Because the ancients believed incorrectly, mind you, that peacock flesh couldn't rot, so a perfect metaphor for endless life after death.
Makes sense. The 3 young men in the fire.
That's from the book of Daniel. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, rescued by God from Nebuchadnezzar's furnace, a clear symbol of divine protection from harm.
And the man and the sea monster.
Yeah.
That's Jonah.
That's Jonah. Swallowed for 3 days, then saved. He became the ultimate stand-in, the code for Jesus' resurrection after 3 days.
So Jonah's statues being swallowed and then safely delivered. Those are actually the earliest surviving Christian sculptures.
Remarkably, yes. Masterpieces, some of them. And the message uniting all these images isn't guilt or suffering, hope. It's salvation.
Which brings us to this huge artistic puzzle of the Dark Age. What did Jesus actually look like?
A massive problem for artists. The Bible never describes him physically. So early artists were basically flying blind.
And the image most people recognize today, the long hair, the beard, the sort of suffering look.
That's a creation that came much, much later. It's not the original image at all.
You mentioned the Shroud of Turin earlier is likely a medieval fake. That's quite a statement. How do we get from that early positive image to the medieval focus on suffering? Was it purely art or theology driving it?
Oh, it was overwhelmingly theological, I'd argue, driven by this growing medieval emphasis on penance, on guilt. The image of the tortured, suffering man we see, like on the shroud, is an expression of medieval terror, focusing on the pain.
Whereas the first Christians weren't interested in a God who generated guilt.
Exactly. They wanted and needed a divine being who guaranteed hope and salvation.
And their earliest surviving images back this up.
Completely. They show a Jesus who is, well, blonde, fresh-faced, boyish, curly-haired, almost happy-go-lucky. He's a magician, waving a wand, raising Lazarus, curing the paralytic, turning water into wine.
Zero focus on the cross, on suffering.
None whatsoever in those very early depictions. So they needed a model for this youthful dipped around.
It landed on Apollo, the Greek sun god.
Precise. Apollo was the god of light, youth, healing. He was blonde, unbearded, handsome. The curly-haired Jesus was directly modeled on him to signal that this new god made you feel good, brought light.
And the borrowing didn't stop there, did it?
Yeah.
It led to something quite surprising, the feminization of Christ in some early art.
Yes, sometimes early statues quite intentionally gave Jesus softer bodies, long hair, even suggestions of breasts.
Why would they do that?
Well, it seems like a really brilliant attempt to fill a theological gap and, frankly, market the religion to everyone.
A theological gap.
Yeah. Christianity, unlike the pagan pantheon with figures like Venus, Isis, or Diana, lacked a really significant female divine presence early. So artists compensated by making Christ appear somewhat androgynous.
Catering to both sexes.
Exactly. And kind of embodying St. Paul's radical idea from Galatians. There is neither male nor female. You are all one, Jesus Christ.
Is there a specific example of this?
A really striking one is the depiction of Christ in the Arian baptistry in Ravenna. He's unbearded, quite delicate, and some art historians have even described him as having childbearing hips.
Wow. So this image of the soft, youthful, almost androgynous Savior, when did that change?
It really started to shift when Virgin Mary emerged as this massively powerful divine figure in her own right.
Often borrowing imagery from older goddesses herself, right?
Yeah.
Like Isis breastfeeding Horus.
Absolutely.
Right.
Once Mary provided that strong female balance within the Christian cosmology, Jesus was artistically free, you could say, to solidify into a more definitively masculine idea.
Okay, so while Christians were figuring out the visual identity of their God, they also had to figure out, well, where to put him, what kind of space.
And before Constantine blew things wide open, the spaces were just as humble as the early art.
We're talking about the house, right?
Exactly. These were literally ordinary domestic houses, just adapted for worship. Simple DIY conversions.
Like knocking down internal walls to make a bigger room.
Yeah, or roofing over a courtyard to create a meeting space. Or really basic stuff.
And we have actual evidence.
Oh, yes. Clear evidence at Dura Europos in Syria. A small townhouse, right next door to the Jewish synagogue, actually, was converted.
And in Roman Britain, too.
Yep, the Lullingstone Villa in Kent. It had a simple Christian meeting room on the first floor, directly above a pagan shrine. Talk about religious coexistence.
And even in these simple spaces, they used those codes, didn't they?
They did. At Lullingstone, they found a Chi-Rho painted on the wall, surrounded by Alpha and Omega. And if you take the letters ARCO from that arrangement, it spells ARCO in Latin.
Meaning?
I rule. A subtle assertion of Christ's authority, even in a borrowed room above a pagan shrine.
But this modesty, this domestic scale, it all changed dramatically in 313 AD.
Abrupt. With Constantine's Edict of Milan, suddenly Christianity wasn't just legal, it was the preferred religion of the Roman state.
And they needed buildings to match that new status, that new power.
Exactly. Modesty was no longer an option or even desirable. And Constantine's genius here was that he essentially invented the Christian church as we recognize it today, specifically the huge Christian basilica.
Because the existing architectural models just didn't work.
They were either too small, like the house churches, or too closely tied to pagan, like the temple. Constantine needed something new, something big.
And it had to be a completely new type of religious space, right? Because Christian worship was so different from pagan worship.
Fundamentally different. Pagan temples were primarily for the priests. They did the rituals inside the sanctuary. The public generally worshipped outside.
Whereas Christians needed a big hall.
Huge assembly halls. Places where the ecstatic crowd could gather indoors, moving, chanting, listening to sermons, watching these magnificent processions develop. It was participatory.
So where did Constantine get the model for this new kind of building?
His political genius was knowing where to borrow from. He adapted the Roman public meeting hall or law court, also called a basilica.
So he used an existing secular building type.
Exactly. That was the brilliance. The basilica had no direct pagan associations, and it was already designed to handle massive crowds for civic functions.
So how did they adapt it?
They basically swiveled the building's orientation, moving the main entrance to one of the shorter sides. And most importantly, they took that rounded apse, the semicircular space at one end where the magistrate or judge would sit enthroned, and they adopted that as the location for the Christian sacrificial altar.
A direct transfer of civic authority into divine authority, architecturally speaking.
Precisely. It was a master.
But this huge shift in scale, these massive new buildings, it must have demanded a different image of Christ too, right?
Absolutely. That gentle, blonde, boyish Jesus, the one modeled on Apollo, he just wasn't, grand enough anymore. He didn't command the necessary authority in these colossal marble-clad new basilicas.
So back to the drawing, or rather, back to the pagan models.
Back to the pagan models, exactly. This time, they borrowed the image of the king of the gods himself, Jupiter, or his Greek counterpart, Zeus.
The big guy with the beard.
The beard, the flowing hair, the throne, that sense of unsmiling, omnipotent power. The mature, stern, masculine Jesus emerged, sitting in judgment over his flock, a necessary figure to match the intimidating scale of the art.
So while Constantine was focused on these huge public assembly spaces, there was another kind of architectural development happening, wasn't there? Driven by something quieter?
Yes, a quieter theological current was driving innovation too, linked to the growing importance of martyrs and the need for spaces of contemplation.
The idea took hold that suffering, like the suffering of martyrs, maybe like the young Saint Agnes of Rome you mentioned, was somehow necessary for redemption.
Yes, and that martyrs offered special spiritual protection. So every Christian suddenly wanted to be buried as close as possible to a martyr. These sites became incredibly desirable, spiritually charged, real.
Like getting a plot near a celebrity today, but holier.
Kind of. And this specific need for a sacred burial architecture led to another round of borrowing. This time, they adapted the round Roman...
Which were already designed for quiet memorial, right?
Exactly. They turned these into churches dedicated to martyrs. Constantine's own daughter, Constanza, built Santa Constanza right over the supposed St. Agnes.
And that round shape created a fundamentally different feel from the long rectangular basilica.
Completely different. Basilicas, as we said, were action spaces designed for parade, assembly, movement, the big public liturgy.
Whereas the round churches were thinking spaces.
That's a good way to put it. They were protective, almost womb-like bell jars built specifically around a precious relic or designed for quiet contemplation, individual prayer, memorial, much more.
And eventually, architects realized they didn't have to choose between these two models.
Right. They started to synthesize.
Is that where we get combinations like Monreale Cathedral in Sicily?
Monreale is a fantastic example. You've got the long nave, the basilica action space, perfect for processions, and the big gathering.
But then at the end,
you get this huge, golden, enveloping apse filled with mosaics holding the relics. It functions like a miniature round church grafted onto the basilica, a kind of golden, magical space for thinking, for awe, bathed in light.
So this combination of the active and the contemplative, it was entirely shaped by the architectural experiments and borrowings of the early Dark Age.
Absolutely. It wasn't decay. It was dynamic invention.
Okay, now we absolutely have to tackle that second misunderstood group, the so-called barbarians.
We do. And the name itself, barbarian, we need to remember where it comes from. It's basically a Roman insult.
Derived from the Greek ba-ba-ba.
Yeah, meaning someone whose language you just can't understand. It sounds like gibberish to you.
And later the Christian writers really ran with that, didn't they? Weaponized.
Totally. They distorted it to mean savage, uncivilized destroyer. I mean, we still use the word vandal today to mean willful destruction.
Completely ignoring the actual cultural achievements of these groups. And Goth is still associated with dark, the demonic.
The irony is just incredible. The invention of trousers, probably attributable to these horseback barbarians, much more practical for riding and warfare than a Roman toga.
Good point. So the art they left behind tells a very different story from the written.
A vastly different story. It reveals a sophistication, a unique aesthetic, that the biased chronicles completely ignore or twist.
And the most demonized group of all had to be the Huns, right?
Oh, absolutely. Christian clerics just went to town on them, accused them of eating children's flesh, drinking women's blood. Truly horrific stuff.
So, since we clearly can't trust the written word there, we have to turn to the physical evidence, stuff they left behind.
Exact. The material culture. The Huns were defined by this nomadic, traveling existence, operating in small family groups, often cooking in these distinctive battered bronze cauldrons they carried with them.
But their defining cultural trait, material-wise, was
gold, an almost unbalanced, mystical love of gold. Sheer, heavy, powerful gold.
And crucially, they weren't minor. So where did all this gold come from?
Well, this really illuminates the weakness of the late Roman Empire. They got it through a highly sophisticated protection racket.
Seriously? They were shaking down the Romans.
Demanding the Romans pay them off annually to prevent invasion.
How much are we talking?
The scale of the Roman humiliation is staggering. They paid the Huns 2,500 pounds of gold coins every single year.
Wow, that's an immense fortune.
It is. And the Huns melted these coins down, working the metal into this incredible art, dominated by exquisite animal forms.
Like wolf heads, eagle brooches.
Yes, wolf head jewelry, eagle brooches, often studded with garnet, magnificent gold ornaments for their beloved horses. It's very visible.
Why the focus on animals?
It seems to demonstrate this profound desire to literally capture and wear the strength, spiritual power of the wolf or the eagle. The art had to be gold, heavy, raw, reflecting the power they'd extorted.
And they practiced that ritual head deformation too, binding infants' heads.
Yes, resulting in these elongated, quite uncanny skull shape. Seen as a mark of high status, perhaps enhancing spiritual, it adds to their unique, somewhat alien aesthetic in Roman eyes.
So this wasn't just some disorganized tribal horde.
Not at all. Under Attila, the Hunnish Empire was a complex political federation. It included Goths, Greeks, various other groups. It was a genuine rival superpower on the Eurasian steppe.
And Attila himself wasn't some brute.
Far from it. He was reportedly deeply sophisticated, spoke multiple languages, maybe up to 8, directly challenging that Roman idea of the savage.
Okay, next group. The Vandals. Their name just means wanderer, right?
Comes from the Germanic root, yeah. They were essentially Germanic farmers pushed across Europe by the Huns, like billiard balls scattered.
And they ended up settling in North Africa.
They did, and took the absolute crown jewel of Roman North Africa, the city of Carthage, in 439 AD.
Was that a violent conquest?
Surprisingly undramatic, according to the sources. Their king Gaiseric basically just strolled into the city while most of the inhabitants were distracted watching the chariot races at the hippodrome.
Seriously, that's almost comical.
It is. But the crucial fact, given their later reputation, is that the Vandals did not destroy Carthage. That's the Roman propaganda.
So what did they do?
They made it homely, as one historian put it. They settled in, built elegant villas, commissioned high-caliber art. They became patrons.
Like the Julius Mosaic.
The Julius Mosaic is a perfect example, a masterpiece from the Vandal period in North Africa. It shows this landowner, Julius, sitting peacefully in his orchard over... It's all about order, harmony with nature, the perfect aristocratic...
Commissioned right after the Vandal takeover. That doesn't sound like mindless destruction.
Not at all. It proves their commitment to establishing a high culture, adopting and adapting Roman traditions.
And they had a literary life, too.
Refined, yes. Their King Thrasimund built new public bathhouse, a very Roman thing. And we have Vandal poems by a poet named Felix that were actually displayed as mosaics in these baths.
Poems in mosaics, what were they about?
Marveling at the sophisticated engineering of the bath, this ultimate harmony achieved between icy spring waters and the flame, celebrating the blending of fire. Very cultural.
Okay, finally the Goths. They also fled the Huns and split into two groups.
That's right. The Visigoths, or Western Goths, who eventually settled in Spain, and the Ostrogoths, Eastern Goths, who set up shop in Italy, Ravenna.
And religiously, most of these barbarian groups were Christian, but a different kind of Christian.
Yes, mostly Arian Christians. This is a really crucial distinction.
Named after the priest Arius.
Correct. Arianism held that Jesus was divine, yes, but created by and therefore subordinate to God the Father, not co-eternal and equal, as the Nicene Creed insisted.
Which caused huge political problems with Rome because Roman Orthodoxy was Nicene.
Massive problems. It put the Goths theologically and therefore politically outside the mainstream Roman world. It was a major source of conflict.
So does this Arian belief show up in their art, if their Christ was theologically subordinate?
It arguably does. Remember that somewhat wimpish Christ we mentioned in the Arian baptistry in Ravenna? The unbearded, delicate figure.
With the childbearing hips.
That one. You could argue that depiction reflects the Arian view, a Christ who is less overwhelmingly divine, perhaps more human, fitting that subordinate role, Father.
Interesting. So the Ostrogoths in Italy, under King Theodoric, they made Ravenna their capital.
Yes, and Theodoric was ambitious. He built spectacular structures like the Basilica of San Apollinare Nuovo.
Known for those amazing mosaics.
Absolutely stunning mosaic, including that famous grand procession of female virgins and male martyrs approaching Christ and Mary. Theodoric was projecting imperial power, Roman style.
And he even commissioned a special Bible.
The Silver Bible, or Codex Argenteus, a gospel book written in the Gothic language using a script developed for it, inscribed on incredibly expensive imperial purple-dyed parchment using actual silver ink.
Wow, that's a statement piece. Luxury, ambition, Gothic identity, all rolled into one.
Meanwhile, the Visigoths over in Spain, they ruled there for about 200 years, and they left us with a really crucial Dark Age architectural invention.
Something that really changed the look of buildings later on.
Definitely. It was the horseshoe arch.
Before that, arches were mostly just semicircular, right? Like the Romans used.
Sturdy, strong, but maybe a bit visually heavy. The horseshoe arch, though, it pinches inward slightly at the bottom before flaring. It comes down further than a semicircle.
What effect does that have?
It creates a wider, taller, and ultimately much more elegant impression. It makes the architecture feel lighter, more playful, less stern and massive than the Roman semicircular style.
An innovation that proved really foundational, didn't it? Especially for what came next in Spain.
Hugely foundational. It was a Visigothic gifter.
Okay, if we're really going to hammer home this idea that the Dark Ages weren't dark, then the art, the science, the sheer intellectual explosion from the Islamic world, that has to be the final nail in the coffin for the old narrative.
Absolutely. The speed and scale are just staggering. The Islamic Empire expanded dramatically from, well, effectively nothing in just a few decades.
Stretching from Spain right across North Africa, the Middle East.
An unprecedented feat of empire. And almost immediately, they started creating monumental art.
Like the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem.
Completed incredibly early, around 691 AD. It just appears almost out of nowhere. A sudden, definitive, and profoundly beautiful creation. And its geometry is key.
It's an octagon, right?
Yeah, which is architecturally significant because it combines the circle, often representing heaven, the square, representing the earth. So the octagon becomes this sacred shape, a bridge between the spiritual and the material world.
And its purpose wasn't just spiritual, it was political too.
Oh, very much so. It was built on the Temple Mount, a site sacred to Jews and Christians. It was a deliberate, monumental challenge to the existing Christian architecture in Jerusalem, particularly the round martyr churches like the Holy Sepulchre or Santa Constanza back in Rome.
And the inscription inside makes that clear.
Very clear. There's a long Kufic inscription running around the interior arcade, and it sends a stern message directly to the Christians who still dominated the city at that time. It emphasizes the oneness of God. God is only one God, and states clearly that Jesus is only a messenger of God, not his son in the Christian.
Wow. So architecturally and textually, it's a statement of arrival.
A very powerful one. And the interior, covered in these exquisite mosaics, gold, green, mother of pearl, glass.
Evoking a vision of paradise. What was the Muslim idea of paradise?
Well, given Islam's birth in the Arabian desert, paradise was often conceptualized as the ultimate. Think green, cool, endlessly flowing water, lush gardens, verdant life, jeweled crown, a stark, beautiful contrast to the harsh, arid.
And this vision of paradise, it often contained a surprisingly sensuous element.
Yes, which can sometimes be hard to reconcile with later, more austere interpretation of religious art. But early on, there seems to have been an embrace of pleasure as part of the divine reward.
How do we see that?
Consider the Umayyad desert palaces, like Qasr Amra in Jordan, built out in these desert valleys, wadis that would fill seasonally with water. They were essentially elaborate bathing establishments for the caliphs and their courts.
Like private spas?
Sort of, yeah. And the frescoes inside are amazing. They show acrobats, female dancers, musicians, even a bear strumming a lute. Really sensual.
Referencing the pleasures promised in the Quran.
Directly referencing the pleasures promised to the righteous in paradise wine, which was forbidden on earth but promised in heaven. Beautiful companions, sensual enjoyment. It's quite...
And there's that amazing juxtaposition at Qasr Amra with the astronomy.
Oh. Starch on the dome of the hot room, the caldarium. They painted the earliest known Islamic celestial map, the 12 signs of the zodiac. Major concept.
Imagine that. Climbing out of your hot bath in the middle of the desert, looking up at the dome, seeing the entire cosmos mapped out.
It's an incredible image, isn't it? A truly hedonistic and scientific vision of paradise all in one. It confirms that early link between pleasure, science, divine.
And it wasn't just paintings. You mentioned a brazier.
Yes, an 8th century iron and bronze brazier found in Jordan, used probably for heating rooms or burning incense, and it's decorated all over with figurative sculptures, including nudes and even scenes that seem to depict lovemaking.
Which confirms that this kind of sensuality was, well, a traditional and accepted part of early Islamic art, not something hidden.
Seems that way, yes. But when architectural seriousness was called for, Islam achieved this sublime clarity and power, most notably, perhaps, in the Great Mosque of Ibn Tulun in Cairo.
Which was based on a much simpler model.
Yes, ultimately based on the Prophet Muhammad's own simple house in Medina, which had a large open courtyard. The Ibn Tulun Mosque emphasizes that space.
And the decoration inside is very different from Christian churches.
Very different. No pictures of figures at all. The decoration relies entirely on abstract geometric patterns, vegetal scrolls, and repetition to create this visual rhythm, this sense of endless, evoking the infinity of God.
And the Quranic inscription.
Hugely important. An inscription from the Quran runs in carved stucco for 2 kilometers around the interior arcades. The Word of God itself becomes the primary decoration, displayed in its most sacred geometric form.
Now, another critical achievement you mentioned, driven by sheer necessity in governing this huge empire, was their mastery of water and engineering.
Absolutely critical. They had to manage resources across vast, often arid territory, and that required precise measurement.
The perfect example being the Nileometer.
The Nileometer on Rota Island in Cairo opened in 861. Just a technological marvel. A deep well connected to the Nile with a central column marked in cubits.
To measure the height of the annual Nile flood.
Exactly. But this wasn't just, interesting scientific data collection. This was a fundamental engine of governance.
How so? How did they use that measure?
Because the height of the flood directly predicted the success of the harvest along the Nile Valley. Too high, it washes away crops. Too low, not enough irrigation. So, by accurately measuring the flood height, the Islamic authorities could calculate the expected harvest yield and therefore set the appropriate annual tax demands for the entire.
Wow. So it linked science, commerce, agriculture, and faith because the prosperity was seen as God's blessing altogether.
Perfectly. It stabilized the entire economy. It's a monument to practical applied science.
And it was designed by a famous astronomer.
Yes, Alfraganus, a Persian astronomer whose calculations of the Earth's diameter were remarkably accurate for the time. His name's now on a crater on the moon. It just shows the incredible synthesis of scientific precision and societal governance.
And this mastery of water, when the Muslims arrived in Spain, taking over Cordoba from the Visigoths, they really really took it to another level there, didn't they?
Oh, Cordoba became the absolute jewel of Western Europe. They inherited the Visigoths' existing water management systems and then perfected them.
Using water wheels, aqueducts, dams.
Yes, channeling water everywhere, creating lush, irrigated gardens, public fountains. Cordoba in the 10th century was likely the largest, most prosperous city in West Europe.
While Christian Europe was, well, often struggling with basic sanitation.
Comparatively, yes. Cordoba reportedly had 500,000 inhabitants enjoying running water, public baths, even street lighting, flushing toilets in richer homes. Incredibly.
And the architects there in the Great Mosque of Cordoba, they took that Visigoth horseshoe art.
And did something brilliant. To make the mosque interior feel taller, lighter, airier, they placed a second standard Roman-style round arch on top of the horseshoe arch,
Creating the double arch.
the famous double arch of Cordoba. This simple move visually lifted the roof, creating this forest of columns and arches that seems almost weightless. It defined the aesthetics of light and space within the mosque, letting the architecture breathe in the ingenuity.
And finally, just to touch back on Islamic science again, it really was peerless during this period, wasn't it? Especially astronomy.
Absolutely spectacular. It's estimated something like 90% of the 200 brightest stars visible to us today still have Arabic names. Vega, Algol, Deneb, Edelgis, the list goes on. It shows the sheer extent of their celestial cataloging and mapping.
And the key technological tool for this was the astrolabe.
The astrolabe, often called the first computer or maybe the first smartphone of its day, a clock, compass, calculator all in one.
And it wasn't just a scientific toy. It had really important practical applications for the empire.
Crucial one. It was developed specifically to solve two of the most important problems facing Muslims across a vast empire. Firstly, pinpointing the exact direction of Mecca, the Qibla, for prayer from anywhere in the world.
Which must have been incredibly difficult otherwise.
Very difficult. And secondly, determining the specific times for the 5 daily prayers, which are based on the position of the sun and stars.
How did it actually work? It looks so intricate.
It is intricate. Basically, it's a model of the heavens you hold in your hand. It had a base plate, the mater, engraved plates called tympans showing the sky projection for specific latitude, and a rotating skeletal overlay called the reach showing the positions of the brightest stars and the ecliptic path of the sun.
So you align these layers.
Exactly. By aligning the reach with the markings on the tympanum based on observations of the sun or a known star, users could accurately calculate all sorts, the time of day or night, the altitude and azimuth of celestial bodies, and crucially, the direction of Mecca and the precise prayer time.
It really is incredible. This adventurous Islamic science investigating the heavens, while maybe Christian science in Europe was often still more confined to biblical interpretations at the time.
It was a period of extraordinary Islamic scientific and technological flourish, absolutely central to debunking the Dark Ages.
Okay, our journey has to conclude now by turning north, far from the Mediterranean sun to the much more severe climate of places like Lindisfarne, Holy Island off the north coast of Britain.
A very different world. That monastery on Lindisfarne was founded by Irish monks, sometimes called the Exiles for Christ.
Why exiles?
Because they deliberately sought out remote, isolated, difficult places like Lindisfarne as a form of extreme spiritual austerity, hardship, battling the elements that was part of their path to God.
A very stark, uncompromising piety, which contrasts sharply with the other great force that emerged from the north around this time, the Vikings.
Indeed. And again, we have to look past the later reputation, the stereotype, mindless savage.
They were farmers initially, but also superb sailors.
Incredible sailors, reached Greenland, Newfoundland, effectively discovered North America centuries before Columbus. Their navigational skills were phenomenal.
And their art wasn't crude either, was it?
Far from it. Think of the Oseberg ship, discovered in a burial mound in Norway. It's just a masterpiece of Viking carving.
The prow and stern.
Both ends are covered in this dense, incredibly active carving. Twisting animal knots, scores of snakes writhing, clutching hands or beasts, all interwoven into these complicated, dense patterns. Very dynamic.
That kind of animal knot work, it must have required amazing 3D vision from the craftsman, right? To visualize how the pattern would flow over a curved surface like a ship's hull.
Absolutely. It's a testament to incredible patience, spatial reasoning, and geometric math, controlled chaos.
Now, the Vikings were famously the last of the great barbarian nations in Europe to convert to Christianity. Their pagan traditions held on stubbornly.
Very stubbornly, and that gave rise to their unique writing, the rune, the Futhark alphabet.
Which wasn't just an alphabet, was it? It was tied up with magic.
inextricably associated with magic, divination, and the chief god, Odin, who is said to have discovered. Runes weren't just for writing. They were for casting spells, for protection, for seeing the...
And it was a living language, you said. It changed.
Constantly evolved. They kept adding new runic letters as the Vikings conquered new territories, encountered new sounds and words. It was this vibrant, changing script, completely unlike the more rigid, formalized Lat sound.
So when the Vikings, still fiercely pagans, started their infamous raids, beginning with Lindisfarne itself in 793 AD, it wasn't just about plunder.
Well, the gold and jewels in the monasteries were certainly a target, but there was likely a religious motive too.
How so?
They probably viewed the aggressive Christian missionary zeal monks trying to convert them away from Odin and Thor as a direct assault on their own faith, their own way of life. So the raids, particularly targeting monasteries, the centers of Christian learning and wealth, could be seen as a form of religious payback, defending their god.
That conflict is kind of perfectly captured in that famous stone, isn't it? The Jelling stone.
The Jelling stone in Denmark, yeah, set up by King Harald Bluetooth, who boasted he had made the Danes Christian.
And it shows Christ.
It shows this rather cryptic, imported image of Christ on the cross, but he's completely entangled within this dense network of writhing, typically pagan, Viking knotwork, and snake. It's this powerful visual synthesis or maybe tension between the new Christian faith and the old pagan art. Very awkward, very...
Now, when the Vikings invaded Britain, they encountered another group who were absolute masters of intricate art, the Anglo-Saxons, especially their jewelers.
Oh, the greatest jewelers of the Dark Ages, arguably. We know this largely thanks to that incredible find the Sutton Hoo treasure.
Found in a ship burial, a pagan custom in Suffolk.
Dating from around 620 AD, and the quality is just breath. Exquisitely crafted gold jewelry, fragments of an astonishing helmet, even a lyre.
And the Anglo-Saxon jewelers used particular techniques, didn't they? Like cloisonné.
Cloisonné enamel, yes. A very sophisticated technique.
How does that work?
You lay down these tiny, delicate outlines using gold wire soldered onto a base. These create little cells, or cloisons. Then you fill these tiny cells with powder-colored glass and fire the whole thing in a kiln.
So the gold wires remain visible, separating the colors?
Exactly. The result is like miniature, luminous stained glass windows made of metal and glass. It required incredible meticulousness, extreme patience, very fine.
And this skill didn't disappear with paganism. Later Anglo-Saxon Christian art used it too.
Oh yes. Later designs, like the famous Alfred jewel or the intricate disc brooches from the later Anglo-Saxon period, continued this tradition. They might incorporate Christian iconography of the king, perhaps, or the hand of God reaching down, but they're often crafted using that same beautiful, painstaking cloisonné enamel. Their skills persisted and adapted.
But it wasn't just gold. Another crucial form of northern art was stone carving, right? The Anglo-Saxon crosses.
Yes, the great standing crosses, like the Ruthwell cross or the Bewcastle cross. These were covered in decorative carving, often featuring that interlacing pattern.
Which is Celtic in origin, but became a hallmark of northern art in this period.
Very much so. This incredibly complex, seemingly endless pattern of interwoven strands.
People have wondered about the meaning behind it. It's not just decoration.
Probably not. It seems to suggest the Dark Age mind trying to grasp and visually represent the very rhythms of creation, the interconnectedness of everything, conveying the sense that the cosmos just goes on in these beautiful, intricate, never-ending knots.
And that leads us finally to perhaps the absolute culmination of the power that words themselves held in the Dark Age, found in manuscripts.
Yes, in the illuminated manuscripts, like the Lindisfarne Gospel, written and decorated around 700 AD by the monk Edfrith on that remote island. It's arguably the single greatest master British art.
And the pages are just filled with
these pulsing cosmic swirls, incredibly detailed Celtic interweaving, animal patterns, and illuminated capital letters of exceptional vitality.
And the power is most concentrated where?
On the opening page of John's Gospel, the incipit, where the intricate design literally explodes around the opening Latin. In principio erat verbum. In the beginning was the word.
The letters themselves become these sacred, complex works of art.
Absolutely. It proves, maybe more than anything else, the immense, almost magical power and sacredness that words and letters held in the dark. If you controlled the word written, spoken, illuminated, you truly controlled the world. #tag.
So we started this deep dive with a pretty bold assertion. The Dark Ages were anything but dark. And I think our sources have really borne that out. We've seen this constant, profound artistic struggle and invention.
Whether it was the early Christians borrowing the face of Apollo to express hope,
or the barbarians translating the raw power of the wolf into shimmering gold,
or the Anglo-Saxons turning the letters of the alphabet into these incredible illuminated taps dynamic.
An era of intense, maybe unexpected intellectual borrowing, wasn't it? Visigoth arches becoming the foundation for stunning Islamic architecture in Spain.
Absolutely. And a time of sheer technological genius, particularly in the Islamic world. The astrolabe mapping the cosmos, the nileometer stabilizing governance through science.
And alongside that, this period of incredibly intricate craftsmanship in the north, those Anglo-Saxon goldsmiths, the Viking woodcarvers, just masters of their materials.
Definitely not darkness or decay. It was ferment, innovate.
So the invasion by William the Conqueror in 1066, it wasn't just the end of the Anglo-Saxon era in England. You could argue it brought an official end to one of the greatest, most inventive, most syncretic ages of art and humanity.
A time when civilization wasn't stopping or declining, but actually accelerating in all these new and unexpected directions, borrowing and building constantly.
Which leaves us with the final provocative thought for you, the listener.
The so-called Dark Ages, often characterized as fractured and broken, actually seemed to thrive on synthesis, on borrowing, on integration. You had pagans, Christians, Muslims, various tribal groups, all constantly interacting, integrating styles, technologies, even theological ideas to create something new, vibrant, resilient.
Whereas today, perhaps, we often focus more on separation, on purity, trying to isolate fields of knowledge or cultures or artistic style.
So the question is, what forgotten ideas, what potentially revolutionary technologies, or what powerful artistic breakthroughs might we be overlooking in our own contemporary shadows, simply because we refuse to borrow, combine, or synthesize the great ideas and aesthetics that are already lying around us, perhaps in unexpected places? Maybe the real darkness is refusing to see the light in what seems different.